You wake in the darkness before the dawn, your breath steady, the world hushed, and in that silence you feel it, the raw urgency of a question you barely dare articulate. Why does the world whisper of success as though it's a promise, when every pursuit leaves you hollow? Let your heart unclench. I lay before you a single truth. Success is the illusion's opiate, soothes, it dazzles, and then it betrays. Hold nothing back, meet the fissures in your soul. We tell ourselves that the next achievement, promotion, recognition, accolade will fill the emptiness. We chase upward curves on a graph we call life. But each step reveals a corridor with no exit, and an echo of disappointment that follows like a silent crow. This is not failure, this is the nature of a world spun by desire. We are born wanting more, we live in wanting more, we die wanting more. It is the will's lament. In this stillness, feel the weight of your illusions. The applause you crave is not affirmation of the self, it is a mirror held up to desire, a faint substitute for a deeper absence. You seek external gain because you have forgotten how to bear witness to your own being. Listen, the applause may rise, but inside the chamber of your heart, there is only the echo of a void. Pause here. Let the disquiet spread through your limbs. It is not ruin, it is recognition. In the tremor of that discomfort lies a seed of clarity. To feel empty is not to be broken, it is to be real. And reality is the only medicine. We live in a world intoxicated by slogans. Hustle, grind, manifest. They are the opiate of ignorance, offering quick highs to obscured souls. Yet every mantra dissolves at midnight, every buzz dims to a dull ache. What remains is you, unscripted, unaccomplished, unrelenting in your longing. In that raw self, there is truth. And in truth, there is a strange solace. The path to so-called success is paved with the bones of illusions. We labor under the impression that visibility equals validation. We present a curated self and expect it to suffice. But popularity is a spotlight that blinds. It reveals nothing. It conceals everything. The brightness masks the hollowness it fails to fill. Do not mistake attention for truth. They are strangers passing in the night. Hear this. Suffering is not your enemy. It is the only honest teacher in a world of counterfeit wisdom. Pain is the compass that responds when illusions break. When the trophy rings hollow, when the applause fades, when the applause never comes, you see the raw edges of existence. And in those jagged edges, you glimpse the possibility of awakening. The modern soul fetishizes productivity, as though life were a ledger to be balanced. We tally hours, emails, followers, likes. Yet the ledger never close it, always shows red. You labor not because you believe in purpose. You labor because you fear the pause. In idleness, you encounter your own face. And many run screaming from that encounter because they see at once how small, how fragile, how terrifyingly alive they are. But I invite you to linger. Let the stillness seep in. Let the flicker of raw aliveness awaken the part of you that thought you could only be known by metrics. The metrics are shadows. Behind them is only the flickering lantern of your own breath, the steady fact of your body in this world. To feel the ground beneath your feet is to remember you are made of earth and breath, not bullet points. Perhaps you have believed you are failing, but failure is merely the absence of illusions. You have failed at succeeding in a game that never shows its rules. That failure is a gift. It is the rupture of illusion, the first opening toward lucidity. Recognize the silence that sits under the clamor and live there. Every 2 minutes of your film, let a revelation land. Let the narrator your soul's echo say, see how you have asked the world to fill you, when you are already full of absence. Let that land. And then the next. See how accomplishment smiles at you, but never invites you to rest. And again, let suffering break you open, so you can stop being fragile to shadows. In these pauses, the viewer tastes relief, not cheap comfort, but the clarity of sobriety. Continue there is no progression, only unfolding. Speak of the modern promise of endless growth, how it toys with childhood dreams and chews them into ambition, how it seduces with shiny tokens and steals the quiet. Let the voice say, you traded your wonder for workflows. Now you are wondering what was lost. In that solitude, the sting reveals its grace. You can't return. You can only unlearn. Let it breathe again. No lessons, only observation. Look at how you have insisted the next thing matters more than this thing. And so you missed this thing. Perhaps that thing is the sound of leaves falling, or the quiet space between your thoughts, whatever you once felt when you felt nothing at all. That invisibility held the seed of awareness. Now, you've forgotten how to vanish. Courage is the fantasy of the will clinging to action. Stillness is not a choice, it is the collapse of striving. You do not seek stillness. It arrives when hope expires. The will drums. Achieve, become, acquire. But in that drumbeat, you lose your ear for silence. And in silence, you discover your tremble, your pitch, your melody entirely unique, entirely unsolvable, entirely true. Pause. Let that tremble race through your veins. Let the body sag under the weight of futility. Let the heart fracture without disguise. There is no shame in weariness, only the mirror of existence unadorned. The illusions will return. The sirens of success sing louder than ever. But now, when they sing, you listen differently. Not because you resist, but because you have met the stillness they seek to drown. You see the play of shadow and light. And in that seeing you are not fooled. In that seeing you are sovereign. In the residual hush, the voice quiets further. No crescendo, no triumph. Only the lingering awareness that the world's promises are wind, and you are not wind. You are vessel, you are ground, you are breathehand. That is enough. Not more, not less, enough. And then even the breath settles. The voice fades. And in that fading, you arrive at nothing, at everything. The soul at rest, untethered from illusions, witness to its own still, trembling truth. The sorrow you carry is not unique, and yet it is unspeakably yours. It clings to you not as punishment, but as a quiet inheritance. Beneath every silence lies a cry that was never voiced, a despair that had no witness. This is the shape of being each life, a vessel of unseen weight, moving through time with the ache of things that cannot be changed. There is no remedy, only recognition. The dreams you once trusted were not lies, they were mist, formless until grasped, and gone the moment they were touched. You were told to chase them as though they were stars, but they were always vapor, drifting through a night that did not know your name. And now, in their absence, you find not failure, but the freedom of emptiness. It no longer hurts to let go of something that was never truly there. You do not fall because you are weak. You fall because gravity never relents. Every ascent ends in the slow return to ground, to the dust that waits for all things. Even the brightest among us fade into silence, and that silence is not cruel. It is the final equalizer, the soft hush that closes every futile page. We are written not to triumph, but to disappear with grace. What passes for pleasure is often the forgetting of pain, and even that forgetting is brief. The body sings its own elegy through fatigue, through hunger, through loneliness. And the mind, that restless architect of desire, builds towers that cannot stand. The higher you reach, the thinner the air. At the summit, there is nothing to breathe but the echo of your own yearning. You search for meaning like a sailor scanning the horizon for land. But the ocean has no edge, only depth. You are not meant to find solid ground, you are meant to drift, and in drifting, come to terms with the boundlessness of it all. Meaning is not given, it is dissolved, like salt in water. You taste it only in absence, only when you stop looking for it. There is beauty in what the world discards, the withered leaf, the broken mirror, the voice that falters each holds a truth the unbroken cannot bear. Perfection is a form of concealment, it hides the real behind the polished. But the flawed, the cracked, the weary, these are the apertures through which something eternal peers back at you. Do not turn away. You do not need to heal. Healing implies something was ever whole. But you were born into fragmentation, into 1,000 shards of unmet longing. The task is not to mend, but to see clearly. To look at your own fragmentation without judgment, without the need to reassemble it. In that gaze, something deeper arises, not wholeness, but peace within the brokenness. Detachment is not withdrawal, it is the quiet refusal to believe in permanence. It is knowing that every moment is already leaving, that every attachment is already a goodbye. When you stop gripping what cannot stay, your hands become open again. Open not to possession, but to presence. And presence is the only thing that cannot be stolen. Let others chase the shimmer of becoming. Let them build lives on timelines and to-do lists. You are not here to compete with their fever. You are here to witness the slowness, the breath between breaths, the way twilight rests gently on the shoulders of things that do not move. There is more truth in a shadow than in a spotlight. There is more life in what remains unseen. You will be forgotten. Even those who love you will forget. And in that forgetting there is release. You do not need to be remembered to have mattered. You do not need to be seen to be real. What you are flows deeper than history, quieter than memory. You are not the silence after the music. You are the longing that continues even when sound has ceased, the echo of a will that cannot forget it once desired. Desire is the pulse of existence, and its rhythm is suffering. It does not whisper, it commands. From the moment we draw breath, we are yoked to it. Hunger, thirst, warmth, touch each beckons with the promise of relief, only to birth another craving in the shadow of fulfillment. There is no rest in its cycle, only momentary reprieves mistaken for peace. The will desires not because it lacks, but because it is lack itself, a wound that generates its own infection. What you long for is never the object itself, but the silence you imagine will follow once it is attained. But the silence never arrives. You drink, and the thirst recedes, only to return in another form. You kiss, and the ache transforms, not into love, but into fear of loss. Every attainment sows the seed of its undoing, and the soul, exhausted by its own insatiability, mistakes this exhaustion for meaning. To see through desire is not to conquer it, but to understand that it is a flame without fuel, endlessly consuming and never complete. You do not put it out with satisfaction. You only watch as it devours everything you place before it. The more you offer, the more it demands. There is no kindness in this hunger, only compulsion. Emptiness is not the enemy. It is the truth beneath all forms. Every face you cherish, every possession you cradle, every future you craft in your mind, they are appearances resting on the void. They pass through you like wind through tall grass, stirring for a moment, then vanishing without trace. What frightens you is not that they are impermanent, but that they were never truly yours. You never held them, you only clung to their echo. To awaken is to stop resisting the void, to step into it with open eyes, and feel its stillness without panic. The ego recoils it, wants ground, identity, continuity. But the soul, when it grows quiet, recognizes the void not as destruction, but as home. In that groundlessness, there is nothing left to protect. And where there is nothing to defend, there is nothing to lose. Inner renunciation is not a rejection of life, it is a refusal to be enslaved by it. The body continues, the voice still speaks, but the hunger has lost its claim. One moves not to attain, but because movement arises. One speaks not to persuade, but because silence itself gives rise to sound. In this way, action loses its weight. The burden of becoming lifts. This is not indifference. It is intimacy without possession. You touch the world like one touches a dream gently, without expectation. You love without needing. You care without clinging. You see without demanding meaning. In each thing you witness the dance of form and formlessness, and in that dance you find rest. Suffering does not end, but it ceases to define. It arises as a wave in the ocean of the self, but the self no longer fears drowning. There is no shore to reach, no outcome to secure. Only the endless rising and falling, and the deep awareness that the wave was never separate from the sea. To live this way is to die before you die. To let go not with bitterness, but with clarity. You look upon your desires as one looks upon fading smoke, not with regret, but with stillness. You do not seek to be saved from suffering. You allow it to unveil what was always behind the veil, the quiet, patient light of being, untouched by all striving. And so you do not ascend, you dissolve, not upward, but inward, not into ecstasy, but into equanimity, a soft, sorrowful peace, the kind that carries no banner, no claim of triumph, only the still, unshakable knowing that nothing is needed, nothing is missing, nothing ever was. The self you defend is a ghost born of tensione, a brittle fiction that must be upheld with stories, roles, names. It whispers, I am, and clings to memory, to status, to form. But in the dark hours, when your mask slips and silence enters uninvited, even that whisper grows faint. You are left, not with identity, but with presence. Not with narrative, but with the aching purity of awareness without shape. All suffering begins with the illusion of separateness, that you are here, and the world is there, that you must bridge the distance with effort, that your worth must be proven, earned, secured. But the line between you and the world is drawn by thought alone. In truth, there is no boundary-only movement, only unfolding. The pain of life is not that we are isolated, but that we believe we are. The will does not let go easily. Even in quiet moments, it offers new disguises, spiritual ambition, the pursuit of transcendence, the hunger to be free. but liberation sought is still enslavement. Even the desire to awaken is a golden chain. True freedom is not an attainment, it is what remains when the striving falls silent. It is not something you reach, but something you remember when everything else is lost. There is a beauty that survives disillusionment, a stark, undemanding beauty, free of embellishment. It is found not in pleasure, but in simplicity. A hand resting in stillness. A bird's call unanswered. The last light of evening falling on a ruined wall. These are not symbols. They ask nothing of you. They are complete without your interpretation, and in that, they offer a reflection of your own potential to be complete without explanation. This is why suffering, when met without resistance, becomes a gate. It strips away the masks, the striving, the hopes you didn't know you were leaning on. It leaves you raw, and in that rawness, a quiet clarity emerges, not joy, but something deeper, the absence of illusion, the end of pretense. What remains is not what you expected, but it is real. The soul, when it ceases to beg for comfort, begins to listen, and what it hears is not a revelation, not a voice from beyond, but the soft resonance of its own existence, reverberating in the stillness. It does not speak in words, it simply is, and in its being, all fear begins to loosen its grip. You need not renounce the world by leaving it. You renounce it by ceasing to need from it what it cannot give. To walk through life without asking it to fulfill you is the highest form of reverence. You touch the objects of the world gently, knowing they will pass. You speak without the need to be heard. You live not to be remembered, but because life flows through you like a wind through open reeds. There are no miracles here, only recognitions. No salvation, only ceasing to flee. You stop running not because you are finished, but because you see there is nowhere to run to. What you sought was never elsewhere. It was only hidden behind your grasping. Even now, if you close your eyes and do not look for meaning, you may feel it, that stillness behind all motion, the silence beneath every thought. It waits without impatience. It is never absent. And once it is known, even briefly, it casts a shadow over every desire. Nothing satisfies because nothing is needed. Let the world rush. Let it promise, and take and promise again. You are not the name, nor the image. You are the trembling of the will beneath both, the ache that watches itself and cannot turn away. You are the witness of your own impermanence. And in that witness, there is no despair. Only the quiet, unwavering flame of being that does not seek, does not argue, does not hope. It simply remains. There is a silence deeper than absence. It does not arise from the lack of noise, but from the cessation of becoming. In it, the machinery of your self-construction halts, and what remains is not nothingness, but a vast presence, unburdened by intention. It does not call itself anything. It does not resist. It does not wish. It watches the world like a dream already fading, and in this gaze, all tension dissolves. The body continues, but without urgency. The heart beats, the breath moves, but not as a means to any end. It is life, stripped of performance, resting in its own rhythm. You once believed peace required certain conditions: serenity, safety, solitude. But peace is not a condition. It is what dawns when conditions no longer hold you. Even thought, which once seemed so essential, becomes a distant ripple. It moves, but no longer binds. It speaks, but no longer seduces. You hear it now the way one hears a river in the distant sea, not with concern, but with awareness. The mind, long mistaken for the master, is just another current. It is not who you are. It is not where you dwell. Time no longer presses against you. The future loses its bait, and the past releases its hold. You see time as a story told to sustain effort, to measure gain and loss. But effort ends when there is no longer anything to pursue. Time is the scaffolding of desire. Without desire, it becomes transparent, an idea, not a force. In this space, even the fear of death begins to soften. You no longer believe in extinction, because you no longer believe in ownership. What ends is not lost. What changes is not diminished. The self that feared dissolution was never more than a shape taken for a moment, like smoke rising in wind. You do not disappear, you were never held in the first place. The world around you remains, but it is transformed, not because it has changed, but because you no longer need it to affirm you. The trees are still trees, the streets are still crowded. The faces still pass with their veiled intentions, but the veil no longer blinds you. You see them not as roles, but as passing whether momentary, fragile, strangely beautiful in their blindness. Even pain becomes a different thing. It still pierces, it still burns, but it no longer defines. You feel it without building a story around it, without folding yourself into its narrative. It hurts, then fades. You remain. The storm comes, breaks open the sky, and moves on. You do not chase it. You do not claim it. This detachment is not aloofness. It is not the cold removal from life. It is the gentle release of your grip on it. You no longer clutch at experience like a lifeline. You let it pass through you. You become the open space in which it arises and falls away. The self does not vanish, it becomes transparent. It stops obstructing what is. And in this transparency, something ineffable stirs. Not happiness, not purpose, not some radiant light. Just a subtle, steady glow. A presence that was always there, waiting behind the noise. It neither consoles nor condemns. It only is. It watches through your eyes now. It moves your hands. It speaks without needing to be heard. There is no destination, no prize at the end, no secret awaiting your arrival. Only this vast, quiet unfolding, each breath a world, each step a letting go. You do not awaken into certainty. You awaken into the end of needing certainty. The soul is not a fortress to be defended, but a sky to be cleared. And when the last cloud breaks, when even the name you gave yourself dissolves like mist, you find what has no name. You find the silence that has always been breathing beneath you, waiting without urgency, watching you remember. You do not need to be more. That quiet insistence, planted deep within every movement of the will, was always the first illusion. To become something greater, to ascend, to transform, that was the hunger speaking in the voice of hope. But there is no more to become. There is only the slow recognition that what you are has never been lacking, only obscured by striving. This world, wrapped in the costume of purpose, parades endlessly toward imagined ends, but none arrive. They are shadows cast by the fire of yearning, always dancing, never touched. You have run toward them long enough to see their emptiness, not bitterly, but with the sorrow of one who finally sees the puppet strings he mistook for destiny. The eyes begin to see differently now, not seeking but resting, not measuring but absorbing. You walk among others not as a player in their games, but as a ghost with gentle steps, unmoved by their drama, still enough to feel the current beneath their words. You understand now how every face carries the same silent plea: to be held, to be seen, to be released from the need to matter. No longer fooled by the glittering surfaces, you turn inward not to escape, but to attend. There, beneath the noise, is a still field. Nothing blooms in it, nothing dies. It is untouched by pleasure or pain. It receives both, but absorbs neither. You are that field. You do not cultivate meaning. You allow it to pass through. You do not argue with time. You let it brush past like wind. Renunciation is not an act. It is the natural erosion of illusion. What you once clung to drops away, not by force, but by clarity. The grip weakens not because you were strong enough to let go, but because you saw the weight you carried was made of smoke. You see now how the chase, not the loss, was the true suffering. Each thing you release crumbles into another mask. Desire for success births the desire for freedom. And that too is bondage, layer after layer, until only the quiet hum of being remains. And even that hum is not yours. It is the sound of life unfolding itself, indifferent to your name. Others may not see this. They may still be dancing in the theater, still polishing their masks, still speaking of plans and outcomes. Do not correct them. Do not disturb their part in the dream. Not because you are superior, but because their sleep is also sacred. Everyone must awaken alone, in the darkness between one breath and the next. You need no witness. You do not need to be known. What you are cannot be held in words or images. It is not a brand, not a role, not a legacy. It leaves no imprint. It is the space in which all things appear and disappear. That space is not empty, it is full of presence, a fullness that asks for nothing. And now, in this soft unraveling, you see that all has always been this way. You did not change the world. You did not rise above it. You simply stopped resisting what already was. The ache lessened not because life became easier, but because you stopped demanding it deliver what it never promised. There is no reward, no punishment, no question. Only the slow disintegration of meaning, until even despair finds nothing to cling to. And in that dissolution, the long-tormented heart finds its first true rest. Not because it was answered, but because it no longer needs to ask. You find yourself where you have always been, only now without the veil. The road was not a journey through distance, but through delusion. Each step brought no arrival, only the shedding of another layer of expectation. The horizon you sought to reach dissolves behind you, and in its place stands the ground beneath your feet bare, unmoving, enough. There is no triumph, no collapse, only the fraying of the will, like fabric unraveling in time too, worn to resist, too lifeless to hold. The way a clenched hand opens when it forgets why it closed. The way a sorrow, long held, softens in the presence of one who asks nothing of it. You do not celebrate, you exhale. No more hunger for more, no more need for answers. The silence that surrounds you now is not empty, it is the presence that was waiting beneath every question, every grasp, every plea. The self that once chased its own shadow is gone. What remains is nameless, unburdened by identity, yet utterly alive. You do not rise, you do not dissolve, you cease, not into simplicity, but into that which neither welcomes nor explains the quiet annihilation of will. No boundary remains between breath and world. The distinction between what you are and what is has melted. You are not in the world is in you. And still, the days will come, the sun will rise, the body will move, but you do not move freely. You are carried, as a leaf is carried by wind it cannot resist. What seems like grace is only the absence of resistance to suffering. Each gesture, each word, arises from silence and returns to it. Nothing is taken, nothing is left behind. This is not enlightenment. It is not attainment. It is not anything the will could have imagined. It is only this, the soft, unbroken recognition that there was never anything to achieve. That you were never missing, that life was never waiting to deliver itself, it had always been here, waiting for you to stop asking. Even the suffering, in retrospect, becomes sacred not because it was noble, but because it was honest. It stripped you bare. It forced you to see. It carried you to the edge of illusion and left you there, shaking. And now, looking back, you see that nothing else could have brought you home. There are no final words, only breath, only the return to what has no name. The soul, no longer needing form, returns not to the heavens, but to the hush between all things. No victory. No loss. Only the disappearance of the one who needed either. And in that disappearance, not peace but absence, quiet, whole, indifferent to story, the world continues. But you, at last, are still.